After analyzing thousands of successful creator businesses, I discovered 12 creator archetypes you can mix and match to help you stand out in your niche. So you know the advice that we've been hearing everywhere online about content strategy? It's either you gotta niche down, be consistent, or you gotta do that SEO, search engine optimization, make sure you got your keywords down. Now my question is, while those things may have worked with previous generations of entrepreneurs and content creators, why does it feel like it's not working now? Could it be that these surface level tactics is turning all of us into commodities, looking like just another expert or another content creator trying to make it in this online world? So, if the old way of creating content may be broken, what is the new way? That is the question that I'm planning to explore. There's two big, massive shifts that I have observed recently. Number one, algorithms are shifting towards interest-based versus subscriber-based. What this means is that even if someone subscribed to you, is not a guarantee that they'll even be served your content. If you were to go through your own subscribe list, you will see that there's so many people you've probably subscribed to that you had no idea you were subscribed to them because you're not being served their content anymore. Now, this shift from subscriber-based to interest-based has its pros and cons. The pro is that because it is less subscriber-based, this gives the opportunity for newer, smaller channels to actually get discovered. Because prior to this shift, it always felt like the big players kept getting bigger because they had more subscribers and the smaller players kept staying small. So I would say that's a pretty big win. But what is the bad side of this? That same pro of having smaller creators being able to be more easily discovered is making it so that audience attention is now more scattered and fragmented than ever. And audiences now truly have infinite choices of people that they can tune into. Secondly, and probably the more obvious one, is that the creator economy is generally just booming. Meaning that more and more people are going to want to come in and play this game, which makes competition for attention fiercer every single day. So during times like this, I believe we need to stop out hacking, competing, and instead we need to step into full embodiment of the vibe and archetype that we want to own so that we can make sure that we're memorable and that we own a position in our audience's mind. So, how do we do that? After analyzing thousands of successes and failing creators and businesses, I have noticed there are 3 core paths one can take when trying to strategize their content strategy. I call it my vibe matrix. I'm gonna break all of this down, and then afterwards, I'm gonna walk through how we can start finding ours. So the entire vibe matrix is built around 3 core paths or 3 flavors. And within the 3 core paths, there are 12 archetypes that you can mix and match, as well as style overlays that you can include. If you want to strategize a content strategy that's really gonna build your brand authority, it needs to be based in a signature vibe, an experience that one can instantly recall and remember, and an archetype energy. Now, the 3 core paths is to be thought of like 3 entrance gates one can take to create a brand that is impossible to ignore. Sometimes I notice it's really hard for people to feel clarity, to feel embodied when they do not have ingredients to mix and match, to play around with. It feels like you're just like wandering in a dark, empty room and just like dancing and punching everywhere. It's not intentional. The purpose of this is to provide you ingredients for your soup. So again, this is not to make you feel boxed in, like you need to fit into one archetype. It's to provide you the tools to start crafting a unique ID by giving you the ingredients of the soup. And when one can show up and be intentional in the type of archetype, the type of vibe, the type of content experience energy they're trying to bring, it makes them feel like they're embodied, that they're owned, instead of seeming like you're lost, you're scattered, or you're just an average Joe or Jane just wanting to put content up online. Now, the big three overarching paths get their power from certain energies, and they build status through different ways. And this explains why sometimes following tactics and strategies from different gurus sometimes doesn't work when you apply it to your own situation, because sometimes that's not the path that was meant for you, or sometimes it's not the path that's meant for you just yet. The first path you can take is through knowledge authority. Their power comes from what they know, their knowledge. Their status and leverage is built on their depth, their clarity, and access to information. So the first impression and the reason why people would be intrigued with them or follow them is because of the knowledge, is because of the information. So if you are going to be leading with this archetype, it's really important that you be working on that. That's one of your secret sauces. You need to constantly be pushing that information, that knowledge, because that's how you stay ahead. Now, there's 3 different ways that one can do that. You could be a scholar, a translator, or a reporter. The scholar is the nerds of the nerds. They go deep. People go to them because they want the most credible source on a specific topic. They're the deep divers. They give that feeling like they're PhD level. They're the researcher. They're the analyst. A good example of this is Lab Muffin Beauty Science. In a sea of other beauty influencers just sharing skincare routines, Michelle Wong with her PhD in chemistry does something radically different. She doesn't just show you what products to use, she teaches you the science of how they actually work. This is going deep. This is going nuanced. And that is her unique value proposition. Her authority isn't based on, oh, I tried this and I like it, like maybe an influencer authority may have. It's more based on, here's the actual science behind it. She cuts through because people tired of just anecdotal tips, well, she helps them have a deep understanding and makes them feel empowered through being informed. But what if you don't have a PhD? This is the key. The scholar archetype is not about credentials. It's about the rigor of your work. Your authority is actually earned. So this means that anyone is fair game to be the scholar. A perfect example is writer Abby Emmons. She's not a literature professor, but her channel is a masterclass on story craft. Instead of quick tips, surface level things, she creates deep dives. It is obvious through her videos that she is fantastic at researching and synthesizing information, whether that be breaking down the psychology of a compelling villain or the neuroscience behind empathy and storytelling. Again, the UVP of a scholar or any other of the knowledge authorities isn't really the degree or the credential. You can have a degree or credential and still not win this game, because true knowledge authority is earned through the rigor and depth of your work. In a world full of surface level advice, you become memorable because of how comprehensive and deep you will go. But what if you want your competitive edge to not really be ultra depth? That brings us to the second type of knowledge authority, the translator. They have a unique skill set for being able to simplify complex ideas into frameworks. This makes it so they're more accessible to mainstream audiences. People tune into the translator because they want to quickly understand something. They know the translators are going to make them finally get it to click. The translator is great at turning chaos into frameworks. They're fantastic communicators. They've really honed in on their ability to just boop, 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 make it simple. The difference between the translator and the scholar is that the scholar has more of an energy that they're pushing the boundaries. They're going more deeper into the nuance. But the problem is that sometimes it's not accessible to the masses. Now, I plan on making a separate video going more deeper into the nuances and the differences between each of the archetypes, because it may be a bit too much for this video, so stay tuned. A perfect example of the translator is musician Adam Neely. Music theory is famously intimidating and very academic. Most people teach it as either really stuffy, really rigid, or just barely scratching the surface at all. Adam does the opposite. He takes famously complex, almost gay-kept topics like advanced jazz harmony or polyrhythms and translates them for a modern audience by connecting them to internet memes and pop songs. And that's what makes him so memorable. That's his UVP. It isn't just music lessons, that's a commodity. Instead, he's giving people the feeling that they can finally be a music expert themselves too, because he makes it easy to understand. He doesn't just teach, he makes the complex accessible and cool, and thus has built a massive and loyal audience that trusts him to help them finally understand. And that's the power of the translator. The next in the knowledge authorities are the reporters. The reporter is the investigator who gets you the facts. I think of them like the newspaper. So again, they're still leading with that knowledge, but their energy is more like, I have a question and I'm going to go out into the world, analyze, study, come back, bring back my findings. A perfect example of the reporter archetype is content creators Colin and Samir. In my opinion, they're the premier journalists of the creator economy. And they're able to be that through two things. First, they act as aggregators. People tune into them because they trust that their content will filter out all the industry noise a creator needs to know. Second, they act as investigators. Through their interviews, they don't just chat with big name creators like Mr. Beast, they investigate their business models, their strategies, and the real story behind their success. That's their UVP. They're not just doing creator interviews, they are positioning themselves as becoming the trusted insider access to the creator economy. In a niche where everyone wants to be the star, they built their brand by being the most reliable source of information about the stars. So to summarize, if you're trying to build your content strategy and you want to lead with knowledge authority, it's about really understanding each of these archetypes, the scholar, the translator, the reporter, and really building those skills of how can you really be one of the best scholars, reporters, translators. That is the reason why someone would follow you. That is the flavor that you're giving. Now, the second path is through experience authority. Creators and businesses who follow this path, their status, power, and leverage comes from what they have done, their lived journey, and proven results. People follow them because of them and what they've been through. The energy here is a bit different than someone leading with knowledge authority. Because with the experience authority, you're building status and leverage through you and yourself and your stories, and not really just information. Now, the experience authority includes three types of archetypes: the learner, the lived authority, or the practitioner. The learner is the relatable documentarian who shares their journey. Perhaps you are sharing your journey of learning a specific subject or sharing your journey of going through a specific transformation. The reason why someone wants to follow you is because they want a friend. They want to feel a part of someone's journey because perhaps they too are also on the same journey. A powerful example of the learner archetype is Aja Dang. In the personal finance space, which is full of unrelatable experts, Aja did something incredibly brave. She publicly documented her journey of paying off over $200,000 worth of debt. She didn't just share tips, she shared her actual budgets, her real numbers, and her emotional struggles. She wasn't a polished expert teaching a system. She was a real person in the trenches, figuring out right alongside everyone else. And that raw transparency is what made her so memorable. People weren't just watching for information, they were literally rooting for her and being a part of her journey. Her UVP wasn't expert financial advice. It was real, transparent journey to financial freedom and learnings gained from people seeing her in the trenches. This built a level of trust and connection that is hard for other experts to replicate, and that is her leverage. That's the power of the learner. Typically, the learner pathway is great for someone if you want to be a content creator and you want to build a brand, but you don't really have any results. You never worked with anyone, so you don't have any case studies. You never made the transformation yourself, or you don't really have enough knowledge to be able to come into the space with a knowledge authority. Now, the second group is the lived authority. These are people who already have a result or a transformation that people want. They may have done the transformation themselves, or they naturally just have this prodigy-like talent within that. So why people follow them is because they're living the authority. They are like the status, like they are the symbol of that result. So the difference between someone who's embodying the lived authority versus, let's go back to the knowledge authority, is that the lived authority, they lead through themselves. They lead through aspiration versus knowledge is more, I'm breaking things down. I'm pushing the boundaries of the knowledge. People tune in to knowledge authorities because of the knowledge, but people tune in to the lived archetypes because of the person. An example of this is Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary's brand is built on his famous hero's journey, transforming his family's liquor store into a massive business and then building a global media empire. His past success is his credibility, and now he's one of the status symbols of what success looks like in the entrepreneur space. People follow him because he embodies what they aspire to become. The freedom, the influence, and the success of a self-made icon. He is the walking, talking proof of what's possible. And his audience is drawn to that winner aura. Now remember I mentioned that the vibe matrix isn't about fitting you into a box. Most powerful and unforgettable brands that really move people do not just fit neatly into one box because that makes them one-dimensional and boring. While Gary's foundational draw is his lived authority, it is supercharged because he is known to be an unforgettable thought leader because of the powerful perspective he has spearheaded through drawing inspiration from the rebel and the visionary archetype, which we're going to talk about in just a bit. So a lot of times people talk about, like in your content strategy, if you want to showcase authority, is to start off with the fact that you've already done it and here are the results of yourself. I've noticed that sometimes it's tough for certain content creators to do that because what if their topic they're going after is not really something that they are transforming on? It's not something that they're living through. So they're not really the status symbol of peak success. It makes people feel like they cannot do any content strategy when they feel this imposter syndrome. And so that's why I wanted to make this distinction, because with the vibe matrix, there's many different paths one can take. Now, the third within the experience authority is through being a practitioner or a guide. This is different than the lived authority because you're not really coming in from like an influencer angle. You're more of an expert who has track record. Maybe you already have systems. You have a resume of helping others get the result. So you are leading with the work you have done. The practitioner guide has a more practical energy about it compared to one of the knowledge authority archetypes. Whereas the knowledge authority feels more like a scientist, feels more like an author, feels more like someone pushing the boundary of knowledge or creating frameworks or crunching knowledge. The practitioner is more of a hands-on practicalist person. That's the energy they give off. And so within their content, it feels a bit more practical, more hands-on. A good example of the practitioner is Alex Catoni. In the competitive world of marketing, Alex isn't just teaching theory, she's running a successful copywriting agency. Her authority comes directly from her working in the trenches with a real-world portfolio and real-world clients, getting real-world client results. But remember what I mentioned, that combining archetypes sometimes is the supercharge that you need. What makes her so effective is that she's also a brilliant translator. She takes complex marketing psychology and dense copywriting formulas and simplifies them into clear step-by-step practical frameworks on how to write a sales page or powerful hooks. And so while her initial it factor archetype is that energy of the practitioner, her unforgettable brand is supercharged by the blend that she can channel the practitioner energy through being a really good translator while also being able to deliver it and combine it with the high energy vibe of one of the style overlays, the entertainer. That's what makes it hard for someone to replicate her because they do not have this exact skill stack that she has. Now, the third path one can take is through influencer authority. Their power, status, and leverage comes from their perspective, based on their unique point of view that's perfectly tied to the trend of that submarket and their cultural authority. Now, the first is the contrarian who often debunks myths. They have disruptor energy. They have rebel energy. The rebel builds a loyal tribe by standing opposition to mainstream ideas, systems, or the gurus. Their authority and their charisma comes from challenging the status quo. A great example of this is Vivian Tu with Your Rich BFF. Her entire brand is built on her role as a reformed expert. She's an ex-Wall Street girly who now spills the secrets of the wealthy. She is rebelling against the gate-kept jargon-filled world she came from in order to democratize financial knowledge for everyone. And it's important to understand why her draw and charisma is centered in rebel energy. Even though she was in the trenches, her draw is not really that of a practitioner energy. Why we remember her is because the feeling that she gives us is that fighter energy. Her choice to turn against that system of her past to help us. And that is what makes her so memorable and draws people in. She's not just a teacher. She feels almost like a whistleblower on the people's side. That feeling that she creates of making people feel like they have an unfair advantage is what builds a massive, loyal, and energetic tribe. That's the power of the rebel. Now, the rebel brings a more fighter energy, but the next group is the visionary. They bring more of that innocent tomorrow land energy. It is the futurist who paints the vision for tomorrow. When I think of the energy of a visionary, it's giving the vibe of like people who are going on to TED Talks. A good example of this is Simon Sinek. Now, while Simon Sinek is definitely a successful entrepreneur, his charisma isn't based on his personal business success or a long list of client results. He leads on the power of a single forward-looking idea, his concept of start with why. He feels almost like a prophet for the new vision of corporate world and leadership, a future where organizations are driven by purpose, not just profit. And he has inspired a global movement of leaders who are trying to build that better world he describes. And that's what makes him so memorable. His UVP isn't a tactic or a case study. It's an inspiring philosophy that he communicates and champions so well. People follow him not for what he has done, but how he makes them feel moved towards this vision. And that's the incredible power of the visionary. Painting the vision, making people feel inspired. Now, the third group is the tastemaker. They're more of a curator. Their influence comes from how sharp they are in their curation. They may not be creating the creation, but they're sharp in their taste. A good example of this is Marcus Brownlee. In the tech world, 1 million people can report on the specs of a new phone, but the entire industry, from consumers to CEOs, waits for Marcus to deliver his verdict. His authority isn't just in him sharing information or facts or keeping people up to date. People are drawn to him for his judgment and his opinion. And that is why tastemakers fall into the influencer authority category. But how did he earn such incredible leverage where his opinion can shape the success or failure of a product? Marcus has been making a high-quality tech video since 2009. That's over a decade of dedication. He didn't just show up, he earned his place through years of work. Second, and this is the most crucial part, but he was always honest. He built a reputation for giving fair criticism to everyone, proving his opinion could not be bought. So his leverage is based on how much his audience really respects what he has to say and his opinion, but is built through decades of earning that reputation as the most honest, trusted opinion and voice in tech. Now, you can be a tastemaker in another way. You can curate via your network, a curator with a thesis. They use their sharp network to select specific people who help them champion a certain idea. They really have network leverage, meaning they can easily get sought out after names to come onto their content experience. So again, curation. Not everyone has those types of leverages, so the person who does have network leverage, they can curate in that way. A famous example of this is Tim Ferriss. On the surface, it seems like he just aggregates interviews with world-class performers. But his genius is that he's not just interviewing famous people, and that's what he's known for. If you dig in deeper, he's curating interviews to lead to his central thesis, that excellence in any field can be deconstructed, learned, and applied. Every guest he chooses, from a Navy SEAL to a Nobel Prize winner, is another piece of evidence to prove the idea that he is championing. And that's what makes his brand so memorable and authoritative. You're not just listening to a collection of interviews around a specific topic, you're participating in his movement, in his great intellectual project. People tune into them because they like his message and they want to be exposed and trust his filter of finding the most interesting and effective people on the planet to championing that message. Now, bringing this back to how you don't need to be narrow-mindedly shoved into a box, he leads with being a tastemaker, but he combines it with that of the scholar. He isn't just a celebrity interviewer, he's a systems thinker. And so that provides a new dimension to his flavor. Now, the next thing is I want to go after style overlays. Because the thing is, like what I mentioned before, is that it's not about shoving yourself into a box. It's about mixing and matching to create your signature unique ID, because then that's how you could become memorable. And that's how this doesn't get commoditized, because everyone will have their own unique ID. So for example, you can layer some of these styles onto the archetypes that we've already discussed. You can bring entertainer energy, charisma, humor. Edutainment has been a sub-flavor that's been all the rage recently. And it's almost like a combination of entertainment style overlay combined with a knowledge authority archetype. And see how that can start creating a differentiation. It could create layers of differentiation for someone to make it so they're not easily replicable. Or you can have a sage overlay, where instead of like charisma, humor, entertainment, you lead through your reflective nature, your thoughtful nature. You have more of that wisdom-driven aura. Now, the next style overlay is the artist. They can overlay aesthetics and bring a unique flavor to the archetypes because of their knack for beauty, creativity, and craft. So I hope by going through all of these different archetypes and the sub-archetypes and even the sub-archetypes with the examples and the style overlays, you can kind of start to see like, how can I really bring it? So let's walk through the process of how to choose which archetype stack, which ingredients you should go after. You want to ask yourself right now, at this very current moment, what is your primary source of leverage? The second question is, okay, what is just a natural content style? Like, how do you naturally talk? Like, how does your brain naturally work when you're not overthinking? What usually comes out of you? And just start there. Is it your deep knowledge or your knack for teaching? Then most likely you probably want to lean into knowledge authority. Is it the personal results you've achieved or the journey you've been on? Then you may want to lean into experience authority. Or do you have a knack for having really good points of views and knowing how to communicate those points of views where people can't help but listen? Then you may want to lean into influencer authority. And if you're still confused, By just knowing these different ingredients, by knowing these different archetypes, now when you go and you experiment with your own content, now you could be more consciously aware of like, oh, okay, I'm doing things and it feels like I have a knack for like breaking down complex topics, or I just have a knack for storytelling. I feel like when I put out content of my stories, people are just like locked in, or perhaps it's something more like, I like doing this. Like, I like developing my knowledge more, or I like to share my stories, or I like to move people with words. And even though you may not have the skills yet, but you like it, well, now it gives you like signals that, hey, well, I should probably improve upon those skills. And lastly, it could simply be, okay, logically, realistically, now I know which archetypes I probably cannot pursue because maybe I don't have the leverages needed for that, or I don't have the skill sets needed for that, and I kind of just want to lean into an existing skill set I have. Well, now you know. So that is really the purpose of this exercise and this framework, is to, number one, help you be intentional with how you show up so that you can start crafting what is that vibe, what is that signature energy that you want to give off, because that's how you're going to make an impression. That's how someone's going to remember you. That's how someone's going to choose, I want to listen to Sally Sue about this topic versus Bali Bill, whatever. Because prior to this, what I've observed is that people are oftentimes struggling with clarity or confusion or imposter syndrome, because sometimes they're listening to advice from, let's say, someone who's a lived authority, and they're like, trying to apply it to their content experience, they don't feel right about it, or they just like cannot pull it off because they do not have the leverage of a lived authority. But it also is to kind of showcase to you that when you are starting to like, oh, I want this ingredient to be kind of the star of my soup, that you really hone in on developing the skills to be one of the best in that archetype. So for instance, if you are someone who you want to embody the visionary archetype, you need to understand market tempos. In my last video, I talked about push and pull marketing and what that means for being on time for a message that matches the tempo of a market. You could check that video out after this. If you are someone who's a scholar, you should be doubling down and continuously pushing your knowledge, learning more, going deeper into the nuance, talking about unspoken things that other people have not yet talked about. If you're going to be the translator, you need to get really good at being able to quickly turn chaos into simple frameworks. You need to get good at communicating complex ideas because people are relying on you for that. If you're someone who feels like at this moment in time, the only path that's available to you is the learner, then you need to own that. Don't be a learner and trying to also be like a lived authority or practitioner. Be the learner, grow an audience, really build those relationships while you learn. And when you do make the transformation, now you can transition. Be vulnerable. Talk about things that people don't want to talk about because it's too embarrassing, it's too painful. Now, one thing I want to mention is that once you choose an archetype stack, you're not married to it forever. You can always transition from it. But the reason why you want to start crafting is because you want to be intentional in how you show up. Certain pairings don't really work well together. Like what I mentioned with, you can't be a learner and trying to script your videos as if you're a lived authority. So in order to go to different archetypes, sometimes you need to graduate from other archetypes. But the key that I find is that sometimes when I observe people is that they're not really owning where they're at in their current point of their journey. And because they don't own it, they're looking a little bit scattered. They are looking like they feel that they themselves are an imposter. But when you just own the archetype that you want to go in and you develop the skills that's associated with each of the archetypes and you really showcase that you're the one to bring that flavor, now you can start building some confidence. And most likely, you're going to start building some traction as well. Now, this was a big picture overview of all of these archetypes, obviously. there's nuance, and I want to explore about how does it look like when one mixes and matches certain archetypes. What are the pros and cons? Exactly what are the leverages? What types of creator monetization models you can realistically get into? And if you like that more nuanced deep dive, it's kind of hard to put that onto YouTube. So I'm going to be launching that mini course exclusively to people on my newsletter. So if you're not signed on yet, why? Get signed on. By the ways, this video is sponsored by me. My channel is all about helping entrepreneurs, creators really find a way to own a position in their respective niches and to create a content strategy and a monetization pathway for themselves. If you would like to learn more about how to work together with me, you can click the link down below. Again, no one is forcing you. I'm so excited to release even more content around this subject on my channel.